Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 13, episode 14. In our last episode, brought to you by Wheaties, we, we are going to do another episode of this subsets material, and we are going to uh, take a different magnification look, so to speak. So in the last episode, the lens was on the third dynamic: groups, orgs, why they hold together, and why they come apart. So the finding was that the group dies when its levels stop agreeing within that subset, and that an out point is just a broken rung showing itself, which is really quite true. So the magnification, like I mentioned earlier, smaller than the group, smaller than the person, smaller than the thought. One word. Language is the tightest nesting a human being uses every day, sometimes one letter or two. Words inside sentences, inside paragraphs, inside a subject, each layer carried entirely by the layer under it. Hope you're following along with me, listeners.
Yeah.
This is gonna get good. So here's the bet. If the series claims hold that we've had so far, then losing one rung near the bottom should take out everything above it. In it, language, you can watch that happen in real time on yourself this week. Seriously. That makes this the episode of which we're going to do here, where the whole thesis becomes something you can use before dinner. Not breakfast and cereal this time, before dinner.
Subsets, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Subsets.
yeah.
I've been saying it all week.
Yep.
It is what it is. And this one is a promise. By the end of the hour, you will have a tool that works on any book, any manual, any subject you ever quit. It's going to
Yeah.
be an amazing one.
And also, I would like to kind of take a lens of even the practical listener. So somebody who is wanting to put this stuff into practice. Most people call it, and they'll just say, "Oh, I quit that because I'm just not good at that," or "I don't know how to do that," or "That doesn't make sense to me," or whatever. Right? It turns out that actually has a page, a number, and even a paragraph that you can actually pinpoint on why you start to go off the rails and say, I'm not good at something, or I can't do that. That you can actually find the exact page, and there's a type of even or something on the meter where you can actually spot that as well. So it's actually really interesting.
Right. So language is the tightest nesting we use. Okay. This is a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset. Words carry sentences, sentences carry paragraphs, paragraphs carry the subject. Pull one rung near the bottom and watch what happens above it. And I also want to say that we've had actually done a podcast on this. At one point, as you go up the bridge, you will no longer need to use words to convey communication. And yes, telepathy is real, boys and girls. And this is what I'm talking about. This is a higher ascending spiral that tightens up to where you pop yourself out of the physical universe and you no longer need to use concepts, words, or symbols or pictures to get things across to another person, because there is no time, space, or distance for a Thetan in the Theta universe. So keep that in mind. And this is really true. I experienced this myself on the OT levels. And it happens to me almost every day, and I
Yep.
cause it every day. Quenton and I have it happen all the time, and we're on different sides of the planet. So you too can do this. So this brings us to the story, the page you read 3 times. So you're reading something, right? You generally want to understand it. Halfway down that page, you notice you have no idea what the last 3 sentences said. You've gone blank. So you go back and you read them again. Same result, more frustration. Maybe you even start yawning and your eyes get watery. You read them a third time slower and it is still fog. You put the book down and conclude something about yourself. So, what you concluded that you are tired or slow or that this subject is not for you. Notice what all three have in common. They are statements about a person and they have no location because you are a static being. Nothing about them tells you where to go or what to do. So you can see how stimulative this is for a being. Here's what happened. Somewhere earlier, usually well before the fog started, often on the previous page, or even further back sometimes, a word went by that you did not have. Okay? You didn't get it. Not a hard word necessarily, frequently a small, ordinary one you were sure you knew, or you didn't even know you didn't know it. There are many different types of misunderstood words. Everything built on top of that word has been standing on nothing ever since. Subsets.
Mm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I actually have a personal thing with this, like quitting a subject. Actually, I ended up dropping out of university because of one subject, and it was calculus. And
Mm.
come to think of it, I didn't have a clue what the word calculus meant. So it just didn't make sense. Like we'd be in a lecture and they're doing all the lecturer is talking and is doing all these things. I'm like, why am I even doing this? I ended up quitting the whole subject.
Yeah.
Because of the name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
it
my
was the
my son.
name. Calculus had no idea what it was.
Yeah, nobody bothered to define it for you when you saw it as a course you could take in college. And this is very
Yeah.
true. It's
Yep.
very
Oh,
true.
and it was a prerequisite for computer science second year. I loved computer science. I was like I had distinctions for my computer science first year, and then there's this subject which is a prerequisite for second year, and it like I tried it three times, attempted it three times, and I was like, you know what, I ain't doing this no more.
See,
Left.
then
Uh-huh.
calculus.
Bye-bye.
Right. No, my son had the exact same experience with algebra, and he was failing algebra. And when we took a look and sat down and looked at things, I said close the book for a second, and of course algebra was across the cover of the book. I said, "What's the definition of algebra?" I don't know. And then when we looked
Yeah.
at the definition of algebra, it said a subset. That subset. It said a subject of mathematics. I said, "What's the definition of mathematics?" I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know. And
Oh yeah.
so once we broke everything down, and it really came down to language, by the way, mathematics is just a language, just type of
Hmm.
language.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
he actually totally got it. And then we use a demo kit, which we're going to get to this probably later, but we use a demo kit to help him to understand mathematics and algebra and communicating that language and that in that way. And he actually passed algebra after having been
Oh
failing.
wow.
So this stuff happens across the board all the time, even in the workplace. Even in the workplace, whether it be a manual or a software, coding. Jonathan and I going through this all the time because he'll be using language, and I'll be like, "What?" You know, and
Oh
it
oh
could be
and
anything, and the whole team is quietly agreeing that something is badly written when it might not be badly written. It just may be
it's just the
a
words.
subset. The words, yeah. Go ahead.
All
Oh,
right, I'll hear
and
you
by the way,
yawn and say,
eventually I
go
I
ahead,
was saying
Simphiwe.
that eventually I looked it up. I'm just thinking that someone might be getting thrown off with the calculus thing. I eventually looked it up and I looked at the definitions and all of that and cleared it up right nicely. And the bottom thing was it's just methods of counting. I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me that? It makes perfect sense now.
Right. And basic math is a subset to algebra and calculus and trigonometry.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
So there you go.
Reading, writing, arithmetic.
That's right. And sometimes when we're in meetings, I'll hear one of the guys yawn and I'll go, okay, so what did I just say that you don't understand about coding?
Oh,
Oh
everything. That that
yeah.
that that whole
It's
situation.
true. So it works anywhere, okay? The fog is a symptom with an address. That's what I just said, okay? The
Mm.
symptom is the address. Okay, you yawned. What did you not understand? Let's go back to where you were last doing good. All right, now come forward. Aha, bingo. So it is not a verdict on the reader. Okay, this isn't judgment. This is just something that physiologically manifests on the body. The body is a subset to the thetan and the mind. Okay, the mind is what you're using, your stable data that you have. And when you yawn, that is the mind telling you that there is an earlier similar misunderstood. Get Get this,
Mm.
okay? And you see this all the time. Word clearing and auditing go hand in hand. They are literally the same thing. Even if I just say command phrases, okay? That is something in Dianetics. A command phrase is a misunderstood in the reactive mind. You're no good. And the person sticks with that because they don't understand it during a moment of pain and unconsciousness. These are all subjects. Fog on a page is not a statement about you. It is a symptom with an address, and the address is always earlier than the fog. Remember that.
Wow.
Which brings us to the broken rung in the sentence. Like you cannot learn B if you missed A. So you're stuck in that fog. If unless you clear it up, you're in trouble. And the mechanism is like A as a subject is not a pile of facts. It's a stack. So B is built out of A. C is built out of B. If A never landed, you never got A, then B is like it's not hard. It's impossible. You can't get it because there's nothing under it to stand for it to stand on. That's why pushing harder fails so reliably. More discipline, more hours, and which that's school basically. If you didn't get it, then you're gonna get like forced into trying to get it, and it's just gonna get worse and worse. Like more discipline, more hours, more repetition. That's what's happening to kids here. If you're doing the final year of high school, grade 12, they have to attend school. After school, they have classes until like late. And then every school holiday, they can't take any school holiday. They probably be like given a few days. And then after that, they have to go back to school. And it's like repetition, repetition, more hours, more hours, more hours. But they didn't get A. So B is not going to manufacture the missing A. Like the extra effort is not going to fix it. So all the extra effort, what it does just grinds the person against a gap, and that is which is somewhere else. Now, here's this is the series. What the series claims, like the smallest size that we've looked at yet. Every rung in a subject is a subset of the rung under it. Break one, and everything senior to it is suspended over a hole, and no amount of effort applied above the hole reaches down into it. And this substance just takes out a whole lot of life for people and future.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I have an interesting story I just heard today. And this has everything to do with education, and yet it doesn't, because it's in the workplace. I heard a story
Mm,
today that a very large multinational company, I'm not going to use any names or say what industry it is hiring because they have workers that don't want to do the work, even though they're getting paid well by South African standards. And so
mm,
they have a company that is basically a headhunting company. And so the headhunting company or the procurer of the new workers. They are like establishment officers who are hiring for this multinational company that literally is all over the world. And this is where it's going to get funny. If you guys don't laugh at this, I'll be very, very surprised, as well as our listeners. So I found out that the company is trying to get these workers that this multinational company needs. And so what they're doing is they gave the workers, the applicants, a test, and they gave them the
Mm.
answers to the test so that they could pass the
Mhm.
test, and then that they could go get their medical checks, and then they could go work. Now, do you guys see the out point here?
Yeah.
They're given a test and they're given the answers.
Right. So who's zooming who?
Hmm.
Look at these subsets. You
Yeah.
have a procurement company who is out ethics and trying to get workers for a company that needs
Hmm.
workers that want to work. If the workers can't pass the test, they shouldn't get the
That
job.
should be there. Yeah.
Therefore,
Because they can't
therefore the
work.
work Therefore, they can't work because they don't have the required education to pass the test,
Stop
because they never
that.
passed the test in school because they had misunderstood. So, how are they going to understand what it is needs to be done at work or want to work when their foundation and their subsets are so out pointy and they have misunderstoods?
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens. You get a staff member who can't do a task, and then you try to get them more training on that task, and they just keep getting worse. It's because somewhere back, there was a skip gradient. There was something that was the issue was actually upstream, but because you're thinking that, okay, now that you're here, let's go to get you trained. 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 That actually doesn't necessarily resolve the problem if the issue was back 3 steps ago.
Wow.
Right. Right. So, like at what LRH says is that if you don't clear the words of your post, you will not be able to get the product of that post. If you tell somebody produce and they don't understand the word produce, what are you going to get?
No product, no
Nothing.
products.
No product. They don't
Right.
even know what produce means. They don't understand that a product is something that is exchangeable for something else.
Mhm.
And this is a prime example of what we're talking about, subsets.
Right. We give you money in exchange for the product. So you get the product,
Right,
then you get the money.
right.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
just to make sure that we don't lose anyone. Oh, just complete your thought, Jonathan.
well, I just wanted to say that is it any wonder the planet is the way that it is when you have this
Oh
sort of
yeah.
thing going on? That's it. Continue,
Mm.
Simphiwe.
Yeah. Yeah. No, what I was saying, maybe just to make sure that we do not lose anyone, let me just quickly go through like 3 or 4 words. Uh just so that nobody is in the audience is lost. Like the word subset. So what could you say a subset is? I feel like a teacher right now. Anyone?
Well, we all know because we're doing the
Jonathan?
podcast and we
Right.
created it. You can go ahead and give the definition for people that are
Oh,
new
Basically,
yeah. Go ahead.
to this podcast.
yeah. Okay, cool. So, like, just to make it very simple, a subset is basically the thing, a part of a thing that gives you the whole. So you've got like a bunch of subsets, and the subsets they give you the whole. So it's what makes up the next thing. And
Hmm.
pretty much it feels like the whole universe is made of these things.
Sure,
Like
it
this one
is.
thing
A
is made of
electron
the
and a
other.
proton and a neutron are subsets
Exactly.
of an atom,
It's subsets.
and atoms are
Yep.
subsets of molecules, and molecules are subsets of objects and and masses, and also yeah,
Yep. Exactly.
subsets.
And then that gives you the 2 words senior and junior. Junior is below, senior is above. So it's if you're taking the analogy that we have with the ladder and the rungs, so a senior rung would be the one above, which is made of these subsets below, and then the things the one junior to that would be below that, and then gradient is like just the one rung next to the next rung, which would be above or below. So
Right.
I think that
But
should
that's what
clear it up for everyone.
right. That's what Quenton just was describing is nuclear physics as to how, and you've got
Mm.
things even below that,
That's
the
true.
way
Yeah.
back
Oh
quarks and
yeah.
da, 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 and quantum theory and da, 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 da. These are all subsets, and those are gradients. Without one, you cannot have the other. Just like your bowl of
Mhm.
cereal has subsets. In order to have a bowl of cereal, you need to have milk, cereal, and a bowl, and
And a
hopefully
spoon.
and the spoon and gravity to hold it into the bowl and the earth spinning. Da, 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 da.
To create
So
gravity.
these right, and one is senior to the other, and that cereal is made up of hopefully of grains and not chemicals, and non-GMO,
Depends on what
and
country you
so
live in.
it depends on what country you live in and what their standards are, which are subsets to the health
Subsets. There you go.
of the society.
Right. which then creates a medical industry and the AMA, the American Medical Association, and and subsets.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Subset within subsets.
Wow.
That's right.
So the LRH reference on that, Simphiwe?
Okay, basically this one is you cannot be made to learn B when you already missed A. Force applied above the gap never reaches the gap. It's quite crazy though, because there's one thing that I noticed a few years ago, like here in South Africa actually. They're like kids are failing like matric, it's like the final year of high school. Kids are failing that. So how do we fix this? And they're like, let's reduce the pass mark to like, I don't think it's like 30%. I'm like, what?
Did they really
This
say
is
that?
They realize that
They
they
really
can't
said that?
force them.
this is literally true in
Yep,
South Africa. This is No
yep, it
Child Left
is.
Behind in
Yep,
America. Same
exactly.
thing.
And this is after it was like diluted. Like when I was in school, you had higher grade and you had standard grade. So higher grade would be more difficult. So if you wanted to do things like medicine or engineering or something like that, you would have to do higher grade math or whatever it is. If you wanted to go to university, actually, you had to make sure that you do higher grade, then you qualify to go to university. Then standard grade, well, would give you like you do a diploma in a college and things like that. Now, a lot of kids were failing there, and so they took that away, and now it was just standard grade, like similar to standard grade. And then suddenly you have all these kids getting distinctions, but the actual course or the actual studies have become simpler. And then more are still failing. They're like, okay, let's take down the pass mark. I'm like, what in the anywho?
Wow.
Yep,
Wow.
that's where we are. Okay, you said the LRH reference. This one is from a review of study. It's part of the study tapes, my favorite. And it says, now, what kind of duress do you think it would take to get Johnny to learn what B was when he's already missed what A was? Context, this is LRH describing the amount of force conventional education has to apply to a student. And that was my schooling throughout. And asking the question that exposes why force is needed at all. For this episode, it is the nesting stated at its most concrete. The junior datum was missed. So the senior one has nothing to rest on. And the duress is what gets substituted for structure, and people end up leaving school.
And people end up feeling stupid. And I think that
Oh,
what's interesting is that, and the way I see this too, is that stupidity is a location, not a person. Because what happens when you go past a misunderstood word is that you go past a word and your ability to handle the broader subject drops measurably. Just going past a word. And the further past that you go, you keep trying to read, keep trying to go down, keep trying to highlight. When I was in college, make sure you get your highlighters so you can. I'm literally going back to conversations I had with my mother and my grandmother. Make sure you get your highlighter so you can highlight what you. Oh, okay. Anyway, so you go past it, and the further you go past that word that started to markedly diminish your ability to understand the subject, that decreases it even further. Not because something broke in you, not because the individual is stupid, but because everything downstream from that word is now being handled without that word understood, you see. And so you can see the direction of this. This runs the opposite way to how people usually think about intelligence. The common view is that there's a fixed intelligence, a fixed level of brightness, and that determines what you can learn. But the structural view, and the structural view is this, that is going to go past, that going past words determines how bright you get to look on that subject. And so when a person goes past these words, it actually diminishes what they look at or we consider to be intelligence. It's really misunderstood words, you see. And why is this good news? It's because a trait that has no handling at a location does. So if the trait of you say that the individual is just stupid, he just can't learn, he got the ADHD or the what do they call it now? The AHD, ADHD, ADD, some of the thing they give the names. They give you all the things, right? But
and then they don't even define the acronyms for people that don't know what they are.
So now you got to MU an acronym, further keeping you in stupidity, right? But if stupidity on a subject is a consequence of a specific word at a specific point, then that can be found. And when it's found, it can be fixed. Nobody has to be uniformly stupid. People are stupid in particular places for particular reasons, and the reason has an actual page number if somebody has had it and is capable of finding it. It's huge, Jonathan.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I wanted to mention is we brought up the no child left behind, okay, and what a student's apparent intelligence is. Their intelligence is part of it is innate, and what they're quote unquote gifted with as a case from a Scientology viewpoint, and what their capacity for learning is based on how much charge they have in the reactive mind for our new listeners. Okay. That tends to diminish the person's availability to observe the obvious. And that is what we would call, in modern terms, IQ. Now, if a person has a higher IQ, they will be able to be more aware and spot more things. Okay. And if not, they're going to have a harder time learning. So that gets compounded with misunderstoods, whether you're really bright, sort of bright, not bright at all, or just plain dumb. Okay. But that dumbness, all of this stuff can be handled with auditing. All of it can be handled with word clearing. When I was in the second grade, this is 1975 in Hollywood, California on Santa Monica Boulevard. They were teaching us how to speed read with our finger underneath the text, never ever having us understand the words that we were reading that our fingers were going under. Never had that in the Midwest when I went to school. It was just speed read, get through it. I didn't use it afterwards. I tried it a few times and I was like, nah. And then my dad had his auditor training. And then with that auditor training, I couldn't go outside. And I mentioned this before in one or two podcasts, but for our new listeners, I couldn't go outside until I'd read 2 chapters in a Robert Heinlein, one of LRH's best friends, a famous science fiction author. I couldn't read 2 chapters in that science fiction novel and not get word cleared on it then I could go outside and play. That is what made the difference. And that is why I'm here today doing this podcast with you. So if you clear your words and you do not go past them, your intelligence will, I guarantee you, increase as long as you have this technology, because your misunderstood words hold you back from higher subsets of higher subsets, and you will not pass. To
Mm.
put it the way
You
Gandalf did,
shall not
you
pass.
shall not pass. And that's why people fail and they give up on calculus because they have earlier
Oh yeah.
misunderstoods. And that's how this society is rigged, folks. 1975. It isn't something that just happened. This stuff was going
Mm.
on then. And even LRH mentions many, many times on the St. Hill Special Briefing course and earlier lectures about McGuffey's reader. This was the standard stable datum in one room schoolhouses back into the 1800s. And it was used for decades and a century, actually a century and a half almost, and was the stable datum on how to read and that you looked up your words. And that was changed as we got into the late and almost early late First World War and into the Second World War, where everything changed, and was quite late for the rural places. That some places were still using it into the 60s. But the education level and this no child left behind, and let's lower the standards, because the lower the standards are, the easier the people to control are. Okay? Think about that.
Hmm.
The less you understand, the less you are aware of, the easier you are tricked into believing
Mm.
something else.
Well, yeah,
This has been
because
a long, long.
go ahead. I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
go ahead. Well, I'm done.
Okay, no, I was just saying that it makes total sense because if a person, the more you go past MUs, the more one's intelligence declines because, and it declines obviously because they're not able to observe or they get a blank page or whatever the case may be. They're not able to observe as much of their environment, as much as they're seeing, as much data, whatever the case may be. Well, what does a person who doesn't have the use of data do? They either A, substitute data, right, which is a whole part of the data series. And we talked about that a couple of podcasts ago. They either substitute data and they'll try to fill in the gaps in their knowingness and their knowledge. They'll try to fill in the gaps. So really, word clearing really is a corrective action. It corrects on so many levels. And when it even comes to case game, when you're word clearing, you can see it on the meter when a person has a full understanding of that word, full conceptual understanding of that word and the way it's being used. And so word clearing is the correction to a decline in ability. LRA says it in the study tapes, 22 September 1964. He said, this then should indicate that to you that a decline of IQ could be expected to follow a misunderstood word. That sounds absolutely wild. But the longer you went past that, the more you had to know that, the stupider you could be expected to get, you see? And so what he's saying here is that the load bearing statement of this whole episode is that LRH is not saying that misunderstoods make study uncomfortable. He's saying that measured ability declines behind misunderstood words and keeps declining the longer you continue past it. That converts stupidity from a fixed quality of an individual into a consequence with a location on a page that can be found and remedied. And we have the ability to do that now.
Right. And the same thing holds true for the tech, because misunderstood words, engrams, like I mentioned earlier, all of these earlier similars are subsets. Okay, what happens when a person has a misunderstood? They go blank, they're not there, and it's there. Okay, it's the same thing as an engram. It's a mini engram because it's a blankness. They can't recall it. All of this is connected, and all of them are systemic endemic subsets to subsets all the way down to the bottom, whether it's an engram or it's a misunderstood word. You can do a word chain with a pre-clear or just in a word clearing session on a meter and pull all of these earlier similar words that they didn't understand on mathematics. That is what method one, which is the first type of Scientology, independent Scientology word clearing, is you're pulling these subsets all the way down to the basic. And the end result of method one word clearing is the recovery of one's education on that subject and all subjects that have charge on them. So this leads us to undercutting the gradient. A gradient, as we mentioned earlier, is a series of steps small enough that a person can actually be certain of each one before taking the next, just like a set of steps. Not a ramp of difficulty, a ladder of certainties. So the one mistake is there is a single characteristic error in teaching anything by gradient. And it is not going too slowly. It is entering too high. Sometimes it would be just the definition of the word calculus. Starting above where the person is certain and then piling further steps on top of a first step they never actually own. Because if you do not have a conceptual understanding of it, you're going to have problems. So the undercut, don't push. The handling runs backward from instinct. When someone is stuck, do not add explanation at the level they are stuck at. Go under it. Get this. Find the last thing they were genuinely sure of. Where were you last doing good? Start there and build up. That's the same structural move as finding the missed word. Both are looking for the last rung that held. This is where the person had a conceptual understanding of what was going on. This also goes hand in hand with mass and significance. If you're learning about a tractor, you need to see a tractor. If you've never seen the picture of a tractor, that is a skipped gradient in and of itself. I need to see how a tractor works. What does an 8-cylinder engine look like? How do those pistons push that into the drivetrain? How does that turn the wheels? You need to understand this whole thing. And that's super important. Over to you, Quenton.
Well, absolutely. And it is super important. And what ends up happening is that we see this section breaking down and taking us to a training where if you understand each problem and undercutting it, going back again, you can find where a person really did not understand or where the understanding went out. And once they find their certainty again, they can build from that point. But if you keep trying to explain it, why don't you understand this? Don't it say da, 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 and you know how people talk. Don't it say this? You look at what the words say. Da, 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 da. You actually have to go back to find out where they were last doing well, is how we say it in independent Scientology. Find out where they were last doing well. Find out where their actual certainty is. Find out what they actually do know and do understand. And then build from that. And that's actually the way you can train or retrain an individual depending on where they are. And if they get lost in the sauce, you go back again. Okay, wait, where were you last doing well again? Oh, okay, got it. All right, let's start from there. And you help them grow based on their certainty and their knowingness, not trying to drill in the unknowingness.
And the idea behind it is like it's not to make you feel stupid or condescending in any way. Being taken back to something simple you already have, that you already understand, is the fastest, kindest thing that one can do in education. It just needs to be said aloud. It is definitely the best thing that can be done for a person. I mean, I usually say to people, what's the point of pretending you know? When you're in school or when you're studying something, you're learning. So the presumption is that you do not know. So why pretend that you know? If you don't know it, you don't know it, or you don't get it. then the best thing to do is let's go back to when you were doing okay, when you actually understood things, and then let's take it from there and then start building properly. It's just being honest.
Yeah. And another example of that is doing demonstrations, whether it be with a demo kit, rubber bands, paper clips, bottle caps, that sort of thing, or maybe you have a better demo kit. I like minerals myself because they're pretty and they have lots of nice colors. But using
I
a
like
demo
pebbles.
kit, yeah, right, or shells, whichever, whatever floats your boat. But if you use that demo kit, if you can't make a demonstration of it to yourself or to somebody else, you do not understand it because there is a skipped gradient there. All of these things tie together. And this also carries over to physicality. When somebody, let's say they're pole vaulting and they're trying to get over that high bar, what do? You lower the bar. When you're playing a musical instrument and you're trying to play a fast tempo, slow it down, nail that lower beat per minute metronome,
Mm.
get it solid, make it disappear. We've talked about this in earlier podcasts. Once you can as is that metronome, once you can as is that bar as a pole vaulter and get over it, that is an as isness. When you have a conceptual understanding, that is an as isness. You now have no mental mass on it because you have a conceptual understanding thereof for it. Okay. And just in music, just in pole vaulting, whatever it is, if you can't do it, cut that gradient back. If you can't read it, find where you were last doing good. Okay. So the mistake in teaching is never going too simple, it is entering too high. Okay. So you have to cut that gradient. You need to have the subset in place and then adding force instead of undercutting it. So the references that apply to this: education by gradient, failure to undercut the gradient as the characteristic error. LRH says, and this is from Study Gradients and Nomenclature, one of my favorite ones. This is from the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, 6 August 1964. This is lecture 397. This was in right in the middle of all of these study lectures. He says there is the idea of education by gradient. And the mistake you can make in education by gradient is a big mistake. And that is failure to undercut the gradient, failure to get simple enough. Remember what I was saying about the pole vaulter? Failure to get the primary action. Can you do it? Can you not? Cut the gradient. He goes on to say you must get the starting action that the person can be made sure of, so that he can then go on to another action and become sure of that. Just like playing to a metronome and being a drummer. If you can't do 42 beats per minute, you might need to slow it down even lower than that. Depends on what you're playing. LRH names the one error as the context for this, that Rex gradient teaching. And it is the opposite of what most instructors reach for. The instruction is to find the starting action the person can be made certain of, the last solid rung of that ladder we've been talking about in all these episodes, and build from there. Same structural move as finding the misunderstood word, but approached from the teaching side. A good teacher starts out on an excellent gradient for all students, leaving no child left behind. Everybody gets a conceptual understanding of it. That's what a good teacher does.
So
Over to
why
you,
is
Steve.
the word, yeah, why is the word load bearing? Like almost everything you know, you got secondhand. So there's two kinds of knowing. First-hand knowledge is what you've observed yourself, and second-hand knowledge is what reached you through somebody else's observation. Through a page, a lecture, a conversation, both are real. Only one of them scales. And you can do the arithmetic or play with the numbers on this one. Like if you had to personally derive every piece of knowledge that exists from the beginning alone, you would get almost nowhere in a lifetime. Not because you're limited, because one lifetime of direct observation is a very small quantity of observation, which puts the whole weight on words. The relay point, like the relay is the structure, and language is how observation crosses from one being to another, and across centuries, which means a word is not decoration on knowledge. It is the load-bearing member. Break enough of them, break enough words, and then the entire inherited structure stops transmitting, no matter how able the person receiving it is. It's just like that.
Right. and whether it's real to our listeners or not, the misunderstood words can go back way, way, way back, beyond centuries, beyond millions of years, tens of millions of years, hundreds, billions, on and on and on. I've actually done it in session where people had misunderstood words way back on the track. And these misunderstood words have haunted them for scads, to use my grandmother's words, scads of lifetimes. And so you have this drift, and some societies put words in there and made them misunderstood. And Quenton can attest to this as he's on OT too. So can some of our other staff members, for that matter. These words can be given a wrong significance. I don't know if you put that together yet, Quenton, on
That
what
that
you're doing, but that is the case.
yes, the wrong thing comes up.
Right. So this is how you make a hard left turn at Albuquerque, like Bugs Bunny said. And that's super, super important to know, that there have been societies on the whole track that knew this data and steered you wrong. Plain and simple. So the words drift and the transmission quietly fails.
This is so real. I mean, just to take it closer to home, you've got these generations that, like you have the person, you have that parent, and then you have the grandparent. The world that the grandparent lived in used completely different words for some of the things, and those concepts would still apply to the other generations, but because they stopped using those words, those concepts get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the
Or
parents. Now the
change.
parents, yeah, or they change, exactly, or they change. And then you have the parents. Now the parents, there's already something missing, and you're still trying to catch it. But when it comes to the third generation, the kids, it's completely lost. Like a whole lot of wisdom is gone because the words have either changed or they've disappeared. They're not used at all. And you're trying to understand, what do you mean, Grandpa? And Grandpa's like, ah, we call them the 2Ks. The kids born after the year 2000. You're just so dumb. You don't know anything. But as again, it comes back to this thing of words.
Yeah,
So yeah.
100%. And even if you think about it, even with like an organization, right? Even with us as independent Scientologists, a part of the reason why, even with ALGP, we use standard LRH tech, unaltered LRH tech, is because we understand that when a person leaves the subject of, or studying the subject of, it doesn't change. The knowledge doesn't leave with them. It's that somewhere they stop understanding the terms in there. Somewhere they blew off course. They blew from their study. They blew from their course of action in using this spiritual technology because they stopped understanding the words. They stopped understanding how this stuff actually works. The reason why we do this podcast is to give it to you at a gradient, to give it to you in a way to make it make sense, so that when you then go past a subject, or go into a subject rather, and go into it and start studying it, you be like, oh, now I get it. Back then I was doing well with this. I had some understanding of it, and I hit these words and I stop being interested. I stop being able to get this. It starts being so confusing, And so we understand that when you go past these misunderstood words, it starts to degrade your ability to understand and perceive it based on that word. And the further you go past it, the more it gets worse.
So almost everything you know arrives secondhand through words. That makes a word a load-bearing member, not a label. Now, the reference on this is from Evaluation of Information. Again, this is from 1964, when most of the study tech went public with LRH. And this is from the St. Hill Special Briefing Course as well, 11 August 1964. LRH says, now you can pick up observation from the printed page. That's a secondhand observation. That, nevertheless, is the route on which almost all knowledge travels. Somebody had an opinion, somebody had a viewpoint, they put it in a book, it got edited, and then it got published. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Same goes for a book. Since if you individually were called upon to re-evolve all the knowledge there was from the beginning of the world until now, LRH says, all by your little old lonesome, you'd wind up stupid in this lifetime. He says, I don't mean to be harsh. That's true. So what LRH is establishing here is why relayed knowledge matters at all before he goes on to how it must be evaluated. Is it a reliable source? For this episode, and what we're talking about here, it supplies the reason the word carries so much load. Ergo, load-bearing. Language is the channel almost all knowledge travels on. So damage to the channel is damage to everything it was carrying. Pretty simple.
Yeah. And so what I want to do, just as we get ready to wrap up, is really, I want you to take this and apply it to your life. I want you to find your own blank, right? So the assignment is this: pick one subject that you've given up on. Okay, not the hardest one, not the most complex one, just one subject you might have given up on. And it could be algebra, something like that, right? The one thing you still resent slightly, okay? Go back to the material and read forward until the fog starts. Then stop and go backwards from there, sentence by sentence, until you reach the last place where you were genuinely certain you got what it was communicating, what it was trying to get across to you, right? Then look just past it, just past that area where you just were, where you were doing good. The word you want is right after the last thing you understood, not where the fog was the thickest. Look it up properly, the full definition, all the senses, until you can use it in your own sentences without effort. Try to use it in some sentences and it just comes off. Oh yeah, this, just like you were having a conversation, right? Then read forward from that point on. What you want to watch out for is this. Notice what happens to the material above it, and notice what happens to your estimate of yourself. Both change together. That is the finding for this week. You're not looking to try to finish a whole subject. I just want you to take a look and prove that the fog can be addressed, the misunderstood can be handled, and you can recover your ability to study. This is a big subset we're talking about here. Study tech, studying independent Scientology as a whole, you got to know how to study. This is why this
And
stuff
each
is.
other.
This is why, yeah, the student hat is at the bottom of the bridge before you go up the training side of the bridge. You got to know how to study. And so, by addressing this thing right here in your own life, you can start to see that the ability to study and your ability to learn some new data can be recovered, rehabilitated, and you can win.
And this doesn't just have to be with textbooks or school or even a book, come to think of it. It could be literally anything, like could be something from work. You have an email that comes in, and inside the email is the acronym KPI. If you've never looked up what KPI means, like if I ask what is the meaning of KPI and you don't know what it means, that's the fog right there. It doesn't matter when, I mean, if you've been using that term for the past, I don't know, 15 years that you've been working, but if you do not know that KPI means key performance indicator, you're in trouble. So this is how low this subset actually goes. It is everywhere in your emails. It is in contracts that we sign. It is in forms that we fill. It's even in songs, the lyrics of some songs. Like there's songs that I'm like, that's what that song said. Oh my gosh. We were singing this song in the 80s. We didn't care about the lyrics back then. But now you listen to it and then you're like, oh, that's what that lyric means. And suddenly you're like, that was a nice song. But that's what it is. Like the fog is real. Like any text, the fog is real. Now, the more you clear these words and this and you actually understand it, you can imagine the effect across your life. What it does, it makes you that much more effective at life and living this.
Yeah. And this is a discipline. Okay.
Mm.
And yes, that's the nasty word is self-discipline. Okay. You have to have a discipline with it. When you see a word you do not understand, you need to look it up.
Mhm.
So you don't have to fix everything, one word, one subject, just for an hour. The proof is the point this week, not the repair. How do you feel after you clear that up? I guarantee you, so does LRH, you'll feel brighter.
Yes. And so just take this opportunity, go back to the last thing that you were sure of, and look at that word right after it. That is the whole drill that you're going to be doing here. All right. And when you do this, you're doing word clearing is what you're doing. You're clearing the word. You can use it in some sentences. It flows off of you very naturally because you know that you know that you know that you know what you're talking about when you use this word, right? Locating the misunderstood word by returning to the last point of certainty is the way you actually find what actually is holding you back. And that's with any subject, and that could be in a conversation. Like, wait, where did I lose you? Wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have you ever had that kind of conversation with somebody? Like, wait, where did I lose you? Well, you said da, da, da. That's not what I said. Let's go back over it again. And you go back to the beginning and you go over it again because I want you to make sure you got this where you were last doing well. And we need to clear up a word. Oh, there's the word. Okay. And then we clear it up and it's fine, you know, and you can move on. Anyway, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, and it's important to note that it's not just on the page, just like Quenton was saying. All disagreements, all disagreements come down to misunderstood concepts, words, or symbols. All overts come down to concepts, words, or symbols that are misunderstood. This isn't me saying this. This is what LRH says. And yes, folks, it is true. And if you do this, even if you're talking to somebody, like he said, go back to where you were both doing good and clear up the misunderstanding. The misunderstanding in a conversation is an ARC break. Okay? Get this. An ARC break. something wasn't real to somebody else. That is an out reality. That is a misunderstood. It can cause a drop in affinity and communication, therefore, understanding. So, everything in this series, this is the piece you can use today the easiest because it's everywhere. Not because it is the deepest, but because it is the smallest. And it is a lower subset to everything else. And the smallest rung is the one carrying the most weight. A person who can find their own blanks stops being at the mercy of any subject or anyone forever. And that is a change in what they are rather than in what they know. Knowledge is power. Clear your words. So find one word this week and watch what comes back with it. I beg you, seriously. Next week, we change magnification again, back up to the first dynamic. And we're going to add a seventh in the series that I've been working on this week that we will be tacking on. That is a pretty little red ribbon at the end of this on how all of this is composed and what it means to you and your future happiness and well-being as a spiritual being. So, to the two ladders of being climbs and why each one is a subset of the other's gains, this is what this is all about. So, you guys have anything else in closing before we go?
No, I think that this is this is probably the one of the most clarifying, because when you think about subsets, who thinks about the word, A or B, BE, or, can versus can't, or, whatever. Who thinks about a simple word being a subset of an entire ARC break, for example, right? The basis of all ARC breaks is a misunderstood word. Who thinks that one misunderstood word caused a whole argument with my boo, and now we in a big old kerfuffle, and I'm sleeping on the couch? Or, well, I don't do that, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, it caused a whole problem. And so you got to start to get this, that these little subsets, and why this series is so important is because we're giving you the understanding that's back of all experience in this universe. Subsets, baby.
Subsets, baby.
Oh yeah. This one is definitely the most important one as far as I'm concerned, because like even right now, for us to communicate, it's words. If you don't have the words, you are in the shite, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
right.
yeah.
The state of this planet and many, 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 many other civilizations before, for a very, very, very long time, did not understand this very simple subset and concept. And this is how we got here today in this universe to kind of bring this to a little bit of a close in this podcast. More on this in the next installments. We'll have another one out this weekend. And for Quenton and Simphiwe and myself, from all of us, namaste, and we love you. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Bye.